Okay, so thanks for joining us for our fifth episode of Liberty in Europe. My name is Demelza Hayes, and my co-host is Andreas Cole.
Hi there.
And today we are going to be discussing the recent Bitcoin fork with Anthem Hayek Blanchard, who is the CEO of the Anthem Vault, and also the creator of Hayek Gold. So if I could just allow Anthem to introduce himself.
I appreciate that, Demels and Andres. Thank you very much for having me on your program. My name is Anthem Blanchard. I'm the lucky founder of Anthem Vault, and we are a crypto financial technology company that has a heart of bullion. We have an incredible team. A lot of us are based in Las Vegas, which is where the company is headquartered. We have staff in Colorado as well, and throughout the country and world. So we try to make metal accessible to everyone. So thank you for making our message accessible today on your show. I really appreciate being on.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I listened to an episode that you did with You, Me, and Bitcoin. I think that was a couple weeks ago as well.
I think so. I think that might have, I'm sorry, we do so many interviews. It's been pretty frequent. I know at Follow the Coin, I think we had a nice interview in Bloomberg West about a week and a half ago. A pretty good interview there, and then I think International Business Times. Of course, the media always likes to look for controversy, and I think it's just important to have dialogue, which I think is really good because I think at first I think there was a tendency to say, okay, well, there are some thought leaders that think we should have this fork, and therefore we should just have a fork because there's going to be a problem and we need to do something about it, so let's do this. And the big hesitation I had, I was just echoing really all this other contingency, and a lot of people that are even much more involved than Bitcoin and crypto than I am, and we're very, very involved. It's really the core of all of our technology development is cryptocurrency and cryptography. I mean, it's hugely core, but it's important that we do things in a measured way, because one of the things that people really liked about Bitcoin from looking at it as a long-term store of value is that we could trust the math, that that the math would be static, and all of a sudden by changing the number of transactions that can be transacted in a block, the math is now changing. So I agree that I think the math does need to be changed, but I think it's really important to recognize that this is creating a hugely material change that's going to hugely materially affect the price in one way or another, at least in the interim, if nothing else. So I think it's really important that whatever gets done can continue to be, scalable in an automated way, very much like how the block sizes are halved and, in an algorithmic way that's automated, that people can trust the math.
Okay, so, well, yeah, I mean, there's all these different sides to the block size debate, and just to kind of give people some background, it seems like right now the block size is set at 1 megabyte.
Yes.
And that can only allow 7 transactions per second, approximately.
Yes.
And some people want to see Bitcoin compete with other payment systems that can process thousands of transactions per second.
Yes.
And so one way to allow that is to increase the block size. And so there's people that, there's debates going on right now about what the block size should be, if it should increase over time, if we should just, make no limit on the blocks. And the past couple weeks, there's been a huge controversy on the Bitcoin subreddit, and between Mike Hearn and Gavin Anderson, and then the core developers. So, I mean, whose side are you on? Are you on the, Hearn, let's, just jump the gun and, kind of force everybody to, try to, release the Bitcoin XT and get everyone on that block size, or stay with the old?
Well, I mean, I was and I am still an outspoken critic against the XT suggestion. I mean, that largely came because there was such a vehement outspoken kind of outcry from this community and other developers, which is really unusual. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that there was an episode in March of 2013 where Mike Hearn had suggested a change that was almost created Bitcoin to fail, and it weren't for these other programmers that came in. So that's a reality. It happened. We all make mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes. We've all made mistakes. It just when all of a sudden there was an outcry, because a lot of times, like even Gavin Anderson has pointed out in recent blogs, there hasn't always been a consensus. People said, okay, well, it makes sense. It was a change that that person has expertise on. Let's make the change. In this case, it was something that's very, very critical as a fork, and all of a sudden it's just basically increasing capacity 700% all of a sudden. I mean, it's just we're gonna need other increases later down the line. I think that's what some of the newer proposals are basically attempting. I mean, I applaud Mike Hearn and Gavin for putting a proposal out there and getting the conversation started. And I think that's really important. I think it's good. We got Impassion out there now, and now we have some other options that I think make more sense, in the sense that at least we're getting to more scalable ideas, because scarcity is a big reason that gives the profit incentive for miners to go and actually clear transactions. So I mean, it's fine to say, okay, Bitcoin can handle 7 to 10 transactions, but first we have to have, where's the demand, other than just spamming. And if we want to have prioritization of what a real payment is, and that's kind of part of the intrinsic makeup of how Bitcoin is structured. So I mean, yeah, we need to scale, but I think we need to do it in a way where the miners are the core, the clearing, clearing the whole network in a decentralized way, that they're going to still be incentivized to clear the ledger and the blockchain.
Sure, and there are several proposals, I believe. Ones I've heard of are BIP 100, 101, and 102. Can you explain basically what the differences between them are and which one you advocate for?
Yeah, I mean, I frankly don't know all of the nuances yet of 100, 101, and 102. My understanding is that they all have to do with basically trigger points of, we hit certain threshold triggers. I mean, for me, because I like to look to see who has the most skin in the game, who has the most to lose and the most to gain. I mean, I look there, the companies that are the miners, I think, and then the core developers on the other side. So they really have the most skin in the games in different ways. So on the developer side, really as a reputation and as livelihood, ultimately, on their side, and obviously on the miner side, more directly from an economic standpoint. So it's actually on my list to study more all these proposals. I frankly haven't gotten too far into it, because I'm expecting even more proposals that are going to come down the line that are going to be further refined. But what I do like, I mean, from what I've seen so far with BIP 100 is, the idea of having an automated approach. I like. I think one of the proposals had, and I can't remember if it was 100, 101, or 102, had like a 32 megabyte threshold, I believe, on block limit, which I didn't really understand. I mean, I saw that the justification there was to have some sort of governor ultimately as just a fail-safe in case there was some kind of critical or near critical flaw in the code, I guess. But it just seemed like anytime we have this kind of block size limitation, it's going to continuously create the same issue over and over again. So I think of any of whatever proposal gets adopted by the miners, my guess, and by the nodes and the core programmers, is really going to be a proposal that has the kind of automated, we trust in math that the same halving of the blocks has with with Bitcoin and how it's constructed. So that way we don't have to, we can minimize or ideally ultimately eliminate any additional human interaction with some kind of real fundamental change in the way that Bitcoin functions. So I need to put it on my list to study some of the intricacies of 100, 101, 102. But I think let's see what else comes down. I mean, this has been very, very fluid. I mean, just like less than 2 weeks ago, people were talking about XT. Now we've got 3 other proposals people are talking about. So yeah, this is good. I think this is what I'm encouraged. This is what I was hoping to see when speaking up. When I did pretty publicly on the subject, was to see some choices come down, and people really start giving this debate some real critical thought. And sometimes it takes resistance and constraints to really find value and really ultimately evolve this model. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see how this experiment, this free market, decentralized cryptocurrency experiment continues to evolve itself. So it's fun for a digital currency junkie like myself. So it's been a fascinating interest of mine since 2002 and joining GoldMoney.com back then, and helping to really evolve and inform their core strategy and development strategy. So it's been fun to watch GoldMoney evolve and succeed, and it's been fun to watch Anthem Vault evolve and succeed, and Bitcoin evolve and succeed, and and ultimately really trying to encourage the regulators out there and just all of the interests out there. I mean, I'm encouraged how the financial institutions have really embraced blockchain, because we're all in this together. Ultimately, we know we have massive systemic financial issues, and all Austrians know that. With the central banking, fractional reserve, central banking structure we have globally, we see it front and center the last couple of weeks, certainly. It's we've been pretty vocal on it. We were on Fox Business Network Friday, the 21st, I believe it was. Right when markets really started really diving, and I think it really, really drives home the point. This is why we need crypto. This is why we need Bitcoin, and we need other cryptocurrencies, and I think ultimately we need metal crypto. I think we need to take all of the assets we have today and property. Obviously, people talked about that quite a bit. All these applications that we need to evolve to this new, better way of recording things, transacting things, and ultimately it's just a matter of time before all of the regulatory impediments and hurdles end up becoming overcome anyway. So better to let companies innovate to the maximum now, and it'll minimize any potential public distress and fallout that will come from ultimate, systemic failures. So, and I think those are the realities. So, the quicker we can stomach those realities, the faster we can run toward solutions. So.
Sure. I agree with you that we need several cryptos. But hypothetically, one could imagine that a significant enough divide in the Bitcoin community, a split, a big fork, might make people lose confidence in Bitcoin and switch over to another altcoin, which might become the mainstream coin. And this kind of volatility, some people might characterize as a weakness of crypto. They might see it as a reason why adopting a blockchain technology might not be exactly a long-term plan right now. How would you respond to this kind of criticism?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's valid. We have to take it for what it is. I think that if we do see real chasm in the Bitcoin community, that I'd agree. I think it will hurt the price of Bitcoin, because from just a branding standpoint, a goodwill standpoint, it will. I think it will hurt. But I think market forces are going to take over, and you're going to see an overwhelming consensus once you see the miners and the core programmers coalesce on either ends of the axes. I think you're going to see everything else fall into place with the nodes. I think, but I do think, Andreas, you bring up an excellent point, and I mean we've always thought at Anthem Vault of Bitcoin and crypto is just all these series of ledgers, and really for us it's about what is there going to be a way that we can have a ledger that we can point to in the public, and how can we have that ledger be created as inexpensively as possible? while still, feeling pretty comfortable that the network is going to function, so our clients can actually receive gold payments. This was gold token payments ultimately, crypto assets, so which we now have turned off because of this recent FinCEN ruling. So we're waiting until we basically have more licensing in place to do this this element of it, until we get more guidance also on structure. So we just like to be really conservative. So learn the lessons of a lot of digital gold currency companies of yore that didn't follow U.S. regulations and thumbed their nose, like eGold and eBullion and Liberty Dollar, and they're unfortunate examples. I don't agree idealistically with a lot of the regulations, but I understand very, very firmly that you have to take financial regulations, specifically Schofield law, when you deal with financial services, is a no-go. The Patriot Act is about one of the most serious of all the regulatory acts, and you have to comply. That said, I really applaud the Treasury Department and FinCEN for allowing at least some windows for innovation, and I just think it's really important, outlets like yours getting the word out that our livelihoods, our children's livelihoods, rely on innovation and evolving our financial systems. Like my middle namesake Hayek said to my father in an interview in 1984, you can Google it, that money hasn't evolved in hundreds of years. So we've had these pillars of humanity, like law and language, that have been allowed to evolve, but money has not. And really structurally, since the advent of central banking, modern advent really with the Riksbank and Sweden, and structurally, digitally, sure, clearing has happened faster through central mechanisms, and central mechanisms have gotten more sophisticated. FedWire system, the SWIFT system, other payment systems globally, but they're all still centrally clearing mechanisms. So really, until crypto and Bitcoin, roughly 7 years ago, that we really hadn't seen any kind of decentralized clearing mechanism that could really be automated. I mean, you had Hawala networks, for example, in the Middle East and parts of Africa specifically that were popular, a chit system, which is kind of a form of that. It's kind of similar system with Knights Templar, but still, really to be able to have the economies of scale to be so low that you could have real, almost anyone basically, right, have their own currency, cryptocurrency, right, and clearing mechanism, because you could just plug and play into the decentralized, massive decentralized network. I mean, this is massive, massive, massive. So we're 7 years into the experiment. I think it's important for everyone to keep passionate about it, and that we really, just continue to move forward as a community, and can, just all really band together and try to really voice that we have to make sure we're really, really thoughtful about how regulation gets implemented, and we're really, really thoughtful about, what that implications are for our future.
So talking more about Hayek gold, basically it was 1 Hayek for 1 gram of gold?
Yeah, so 1 Hayek is 1 Hayek redeemable for 1 gram of gold in an Anthem Vault account. So basically like a bearer certificate. So, but in this case, a bearer token or bearer digital instrument, right? So, and that's something that I also impress with people too. That really cryptocurrency, it's really akin more to like an LLC or a corporation or a certificate or a bond. It's a new kind of vehicle. I mean, it obviously has very special properties because it's the network and the vehicle, and also the payment token all in one. Ultimately, all in this network, kind of tied in together. But ultimately, it's just a new advancement of vehicle. So I think explaining cryptocurrency to laymen, it's always really important to talk about application. So I think that's where people say, oh yeah, like I understand what a bearer bond is, I understand what a bearer certificate is, I understand what peer-to-peer is. Like if I give someone cash, it's peer-to-peer, right? So it's like there doesn't take any centralized clearing mechanism to clear the payment. So that's, and we see it all the time. We see it all the time in new emerging technologies where the real advocates love the technology and this love the fundamentals, but ultimately greater adoption relies on application because people just want to see this is cheaper, faster, better, safer, for me. So like that's why I'll use them. I don't really care how it works. Like email, right? Or like how does this, Google Hangout work out right now? Well, I don't really know. I kind of impaired, barely, not really, but it's working, right? And so that's the beauty of technology at its best, I think, when it's simplest, most refined. So
Yeah, and then how would Hayek Gold, what are the benefits of using Hayek Gold instead of, say, for example, coloring a Bitcoin?
this is, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a colored Bitcoin in essence. So it's because Hayek Gold is on top of Counterparty, which works basically just like a colored coin, or very not just, but very similarly. So it's just layers. So Bitcoin blockchain is layer 0, then like a colored coin would be a layer 1, or Counterparty layer 1, and then Hayek is a crypto token on top of Counterparty.
So what are you doing for proof of reserves?
So for proof of reserves, right now we have all of that just maintained centrally at the moment. That's something that we have a bar list that we update as metal comes in and out of the vault. So I do want to eventually tie to blockchain. It's something that we have aspirations to do. I originally had been a little reluctant to do it because I thought that it might tie us into money service business realm a little bit faster potentially. Now that point might be, I'm a little bit less concerned about it. Just seeing bit reserve and some of the treatments. We have a little bit of precedent out there, arguably in the market. So it's something that I think is interesting. Ultimately, there's other aspects that I can't get into too much that we're working on that more have to do, I'd say, with Internet of Things application. Than kind of the tying crypto to an inventory list ultimately. But our procedures internally are that we have third-party vault operator, and we match up third-party vault operator to our system, and then we have best practices controls where we have multiple operators and checks, and that we have AICPA, PCAOB audits that basically do the control checks there. So that's the basic best practices for fractional metal ownership. But I think that the applications for crypto for authentication are very, very intriguing, and I don't want to let too many cats out the bag quite yet. But we're very keen and are looking very heavily into all sorts of different crypto verification applications. So I think it's a neat application, proof of custody, onto crypto. I think it's a neat idea. I think really we've just started to scratch the surface on ideas. So but yeah, I think there'll be some exciting developments that people will appreciate coming from Anthem Vault pretty soon on the topic. So. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Right, because that's the principal concern with any gold voucher, whether it's physical or virtual. You need to know that the amount of gold is really out of circulation, not being spent out there. And if you can prove that to people, I think there's a lot of space for that kind of assets in the crypto world.
Yeah, I mean, right now I would say the best protection someone honestly has, right, my witness of it is statutory, the fact that we're in the U.S. and the fact that the U.S., for better or worse, has come down very, very hard when companies have stolen from their clients in the fractional metal ownership, digital currency space, and in some cases come down because they were blatantly flaunting that they we're basically looking at the other way at U.S. Federal code. Again, I understand the sympathies, some sympathy arguments behind it, but that's not how the U.S. courts have chosen to prosecute the laws, and the verdicts that have come down have not been favorable. When people have tried to go against U.S. federal code, specifically in any of the realms of financial services, anything that touches Treasury, basically. So, that's just fact. Again, given some of the examples of some of the graveyard of names of proprietors that didn't respect those unfortunate facts, rightly or wrongly, it's just the reality. So I think people can rest assured that if we are stealing, that we are in a place, in a jurisdiction that has had a very almost zero tolerance policy toward any kind of impropriety. Even in some cases when a lot of people didn't even think there was an impropriety, right, like Liberty Dollar. But that's arguable, I think. So, but yeah, I think what's important is dealing with people that understand the regulatory landscape and respect it. That's been my experience in fintech, being in the industry since September of '02 with Liberty.me. They were an offshore money service business. They still are. That's it's a reality after 9/11 and the Patriot Act as an extension of the Bank Secrecy Act. It's just fintech has to be cognizant because the Patriot Act is global. The IMF has implemented the Patriot Act globally. I mean, that's been in place now for a decade, basically. So globally, pretty much, at least most of it. So, and just understanding the lay of the land and making sure you comply. And it's frankly, in a lot of ways, never been easier to actually do the physical compliance because of technology and how long now the Patriot Act has been in place. At the same time, the surety bonds and money service licenses, companies like Coinbase have come out and been really open about how expensive and how long the processes take, and they are regulatory hurdles that have been in place for decades in these different states that have been enacted, different state legislatures that are ultimately, indirectly, protectionist type instruments, unfortunately, that have been erected in these different states. But again, they're realities. So that's understanding those realities and then saying, okay, well, that's understanding the rule of law in these different jurisdictions. And I think that's where we have a really nice advantage. I hate to say nice advantage, but I guess a reality-based advantage of understanding the U.S. fin and regulatory money service business, precious metal laws as best we can, and ultimately the genesis of all of these financial services IMF laws all arrive from the U.S. So I think it's a reality, but it's good to talk about this reality. So it helps us kind of think about, are some of these ways that we're going with regulation, how damaging are they? How can the two coexist? How can the government feel like, well, we can feel like we kind of have a sense of control, but at the same time that just like the internet completely destroyed the music industry, which I think we all saw what happened there. I think we're seeing the very early innings of money and banking and financial services, and you see Wall Street reacting very strongly. You see all the Fed member banks practically at this point have innovations, development labs, VC arms, different, or all of them in some cases, that are all going into blockchain. And this is, I think, now the hottest area in tech, or starting to become the hottest area in tech. So starting to displace biotech, I think, now as the real flavor of the day for Wall Street. So it's getting interesting.
So, okay, just to change the topic a little bit, I heard in one of your interviews that you were discussing how if you like something and the price goes down, it's just a good time to buy it. So, I mean, you mentioned that gold had been up at $1,900 an ounce, and that Bitcoin had been up higher. And how can you determine that these are really warranted increases in the value of a commodity as compared to a malinvestment caused by fractional reserve banking. Because, for example, Dr. Block at Loyola University, Dr. Walter Block, he thinks that Bitcoin is a malinvestment. There's a lot of people that think that Bitcoin gold is still overvalued, because, and they basically say that it's a commodity boom caused by fractional reserve printing. So, how do you determine that gold or Bitcoin is accurately priced?
So I think it's important to differentiate firstly between Bitcoin and gold. So Bitcoin has been around for 7 years. Gold has been around since supernovas of stars, right? So colliding and landing onto Earth in different ways. So the two are very different. Gold has been a store of value since recorded antiquity. Humans have always ascribed some value to gold. So Bitcoin is something very new. It's ultimately a vehicle, a very sophisticated one. It's not, you can't consider it a long-term store of value because it hasn't been around long-term. So I think Professor Block is very correct in calling it what it is. It's a speculative investment at best. And you see the price action has reacted that way over the last 7 years, to be expected. So I do think that it's the ultimate fail-safe and ultimate trapeze, and that the more staunch that governments get and central banks, as vehicles of governments, become, that is something that I think will protect against that scenario, because it'll ultimately make Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that much more valuable, because it'll be like the ultimate contraband, to get this, decentralized crypto. And the more decentralized, anonymous the crypto is, the more valuable it'll become. So the Pandora's box has already been open, and the cat's out the bag. In terms of pricing, why are things priced the way they are? Yeah, I would argue that the reason that Bitcoin has been as price volatile as it has been, and is in demand, is because we have a central banking structure in place. And yeah, the prices of everything in the world are all predicated on central bank activity at this point, because every single fiat currency in the world is majority backed by U.S. dollars, U.S. dollar treasuries, U.S. dollar agencies, Freddie Franny mortgages, for example, and corporate debt that are denominated in dollars, and in some cases, other sovereign debt that are denominated in dollars, because their currencies aren't considered good enough for the bond market, or other U.S. corporations that are AAA rated as debt. So keep in mind, anytime one has a debt or a debt instrument denominated in dollars, it creates demand for the dollars when the debt comes due. So the world has a one world currency already, and I think that's one of the most forgotten things, is that when you really boil down all the reserves, it all comes down to dollars. And even euros are majority dollars, so and dollar denominated instruments. So yen, look at the yuan right now with unwinding over $1 trillion worth of treasuries. So that's what's really important. So in terms of gold reacting, gold has been interesting to me, because it typically will react in one of two environments. One is traditional real negative interest rates, which it actually hasn't been correlated to very much in the last 5 years. And the other is credit risk, increased credit risk or decreased credit risk. And that is what is seemingly gold has been reacting to more and more, because we've had real negative interest rates or decelerating interest rates now for 6 years, and gold has underperformed. And that's been a real head scratcher for me, because there has been a really high correlation going back 50 years, for example. So why is this? Well, I now look at it and say, well, in 2008 you had a complete bailout of the global financial fiat fractional reserve central banking system, and so the market basically ceased to exist, and you basically now you have to speculate, because the money is so cheap, artificially cheap. Basically, in some ways, it's showing an artificially strong currency, even with the currency being printed to the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars, with all of these, QEs, money prints, and so, that's the reality. So it's a crazy reality, and that's why you see Wall Street, and that's where you see the places that can most levered take advantage of this crazy artificial interest rate and go into these speculative investments, because the assumption is that, well, the market can't fail, the banking system can't fail, because in 2008 the Federal Reserve and the central banks of the world didn't allow it to fail. Therefore, we need to milk the cows as hard as possible, pardon the expression, but we need to basically take as much out as we can of every single investment that we create out there, and try to build it up and bolster it up as much as we can to milk as much out of it, because that's how the game is structured now, because it's all about we're going to get bailed out. So it's like, how much excitement and exuberance can we create as investment banks or as a bank of any sort or financial? I mean, that's the nature. I mean, you read like manias, panics, and crashes. Charles Hindleburg. You read, these famous, history, the cycles, and you see what happened in most recently in 2008, and how much is online and been covered. It's very predictable. So it's very predictable once you study.
Well, I mean, for investing, like my aunt and I, we discuss different books, and every week we discuss different ways to kind of protect our investments. And one thing that she was mentioning was, if an asset's growing faster than GDP, then that could be a signal that it's a bubble. How would you agree with that, or is that just a wives' tale, or what?
That's interesting. That makes sense as a metric for. I mean, that would make sense as debt, I guess, right? So I mean, debt metrics have gone up a lot faster than GDP. So bonds. I would say specifically. I mean, I think you have to be careful when it comes to treasuries, because of the U.S. dollar's continued position as world's reserve currency. I mean, that's where it causes a lot of perversion from like what we would typically think of as like a more traditional economics, where we would have like gold standard, or we would have competing national currencies as alternate reserve currencies, but that's not our reality. So that's important to always keep into context what the upside down world of the dollar, fiat, being the world's reserve currency.
So going back a little bit, what a lot of people are worried about right now is adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. I mean, the whole reason we're having this whole block size debate is because we're planning for there to be a lot more adoption, a lot more use to the network. If we only kept the amount of users of Bitcoin the same right now, we wouldn't need a bigger block size. The current block size is even too big for the current amount of users. So what do you think is limiting adoption? What do you think we can do about that?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to keep the price up, because people ultimately like when prices go up, right? It makes us feel good, right? We always say it's really easy to make investors happy. You just have to keep the graph going from the lower left-hand side of the axis to the upper right-hand side of the axis, and as incremental as you can, people are happy. So that's the key, and that's why I've been so vehemently against really huge increases in the block size, because I think exactly to your point, Andreas, like until we have that resistance, then we're not going to create new interest, because people are going to be most interested when they see the price going up, until there's a serious problem, would be my big caveat. So like Greece is a really intriguing place for me, and so I know we actually got connected through a mutual friend that was a Greek originally, and so Alex, and so that I think places that are experiencing capital controls in real time, like a Cyprus or a Greece, we'll see kind of what happens. Fluid situations we have in Venezuela, Ukraine, Argentina. I would say it's more kind of really interesting red alert zones. So always intriguing to see what happens. I think the beautiful thing is that even worst case scenario and Bitcoin blows up, that we have thousands of other cryptocurrencies out there already, and already dozens that are very popular. So maybe this first one won't be the one. Maybe there won't be a one. maybe it's ultimately thousands of different blockchains that all work together. I tend to think that there probably will be a backbone, or at least a few main backbone crypto currencies out there. It makes sense to me, and I still think Bitcoin is the one. I do, but I think that we need to think really carefully. I mean, I think that was one of the issues. That was one of my main issues. I just felt like it was really weird because it was like seemed like Bitcoin community has been such a thoughtful community, right? Like Reddit and everyone's been so thoughtful. I mean, that's been one of the most amazing things I think of seeing the Bitcoin community is how well it's progressed to this point. I mean, a $3 billion market cap. I mean, can you imagine if most companies that had that kind of market cap were this kind of cooperative? I mean, it's kind of amazing. And so it was kind of weird. All of a sudden, it's just like we went headstrong into this, XT and like, all of a sudden, all these other programmers were vehemently against it, and these other programmers were vehemently for it, and it was just weird. And it was 700% from 1 to 8. And there wasn't, really clear mechanisms to me necessarily of like a governor, some kind of automated algorithmic governor that could be set that would hopefully eliminate or really minimize any other future human interactions with this. So, they're making us ask these questions of, let's see, let's kind of see how Bitcoin evolves. It's not the end of the world, even if it doesn't evolve, because the world we live in is real. I mean, we have real things around us, and Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger. I mean, the blockchain is a decentralized ledger, and so that's really the ultimate creation. It's a secure, decentralized, immutable ledger, and so that's done. I mean, the cat is out the bag. Pandora's box is open, and it will not return. I mean, what it means to remittance and payments, a loan and record keeping, and deeds, and any kind of property title, and contracts. Ultimately, alone, the value just in those areas is in the hundreds of billions.
Can the average person actually do all of those things? Can they actually use Bitcoin those ways? I mean, I'm not trying to be cynical here, but the average person you ask in the street, and this has been done before, the average person doesn't know the difference between a browser and a search engine. How do you propose that we get all contracts and property titles and transfers of currency done digitally when a lot of people can't even send an email?
Great question. I think it's going to take the real great user experience companies of the world, the Amazons of the world, the Apples of the world, to really, the Googles of the world, of course, to really embrace blockchain and crypto, because it's ultimately going to be, or other companies, I mean, we're obviously, we try to, our mantra is to try to emulate as much as we can simplistic design and intuitive design, and getting to that point, it's hard, but it reminds me a lot of DOS, before Microsoft Windows, or, Macintosh GUI, right? The difference between that or command line, where it's going to take these applications to say, and applications, and then enough applications, and then enough state examples, because ultimately a lot of these are all really heavily regulated activities. So, I mean, we started seeing a little bit of, talks with some, governments starting to look at crypto, but I think it's going to take some really forward-thinking local governments ultimately that are going to be embracing different applications, and then you'll see more local governments, and the places that the pain points are the worst, the places that are the most disorganized, the places that have the least amount of money for these activities like title and contracts and record keeping. And those are the places I would imagine you will see blockchain record keeping, whether that's the Bitcoin blockchain or another. I mean, again, that's the beautiful thing, is that you can always keep a record of the Bitcoin blockchain, even if it ceases to really, become dominant and the number of transactions falls off a cliff, and Litecoin becomes, the latest blockchain, or some other crypto, chain, cryptocurrency that, maybe isn't even out now. So you can always preserve the old ledgers and have there be reference points, right? Like as Bitcoin, as long as there's just a handful of computers running, you can clear a transaction. as long as I guess a high enough miner fee, right? Technically, in theory. So I think it's important to take a step back and think about the function really. And yeah, I mean, we need to focus on the application and really what this can do, but then like what does it look like to the user, and then how do you get to that point? So these are great questions. They're really, really good questions, I think, in my humble opinion.
Right. And also, do you have something?
No, I think that that's about our the whole interview. That's been about an hour.
Thank you.
And we really wanted to thank Anthem for coming on the show and for discussing the fork and other topics at Anthem Vault and Hayek Gold. And we hope to see Hayek Gold being traded again soon.
Yes, yeah, we do too. And we have some really exciting. I mean, we're all about making gold really the most valuable asset in the world with Anthem Vault, and so it's really through liquidity. So I mean, it's keeping it simple and keeping it trustworthy and keeping it really easy for people to use, but then adding applications in a way that people it's going to be valuable to them. So we appreciate everyone's patience, and we want to make this a really huge show that ultimately we are for preserving people's value. And we're also really into crypto. I mean, I can now announce that very shortly, it should be next week, amagimetals.com is going to be an Anthem Vault property. So Amagi Metals has been the largest Bitcoin to precious metal retailer historically. So we're really, really excited about that. So we have huge, ambitious crypto development going on in real time, and still, it's just one of those things that we understand the realities of dealing with U.S. Treasury and FinCEN because we've been in fintech for a decade plus. So it's a pleasure to be on your show, Demelza and Andreas. Thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And also for next week, for our viewers, we're going to be hopefully broadcasting live next week. And we're going to have Dr. Guido Hulsmann with us, who is a professor from the University of Angers in France, and also he's a senior fellow at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. So we thank Anthem again, and we hope to see all of you next week.
See you guys next week.
Very clear.